Welcome again for all those who weren't here at the beginning when I was when I started the Lunch and Learn session. And today we're talking about the future of risk management, and this is a very sometimes sensitive subject because in the world of data analysis and AI, the whole function of risk management has the scope to make fundamental changes, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to set the scene just a little bit on the PDA task force and coalition. So in 2020, the PDA task force was formed really to raise awareness, educate, inspire people, and to lobby government in the main, but others, and influence policy. In April this year, the government published their paper on data analysis and AI in government project delivery. And so there was then a need to move beyond policy into delivering capability and capacity across the whole profession. So in 2024, the Project Data Analytics Coalition was formed, predominantly a group of client organizations. And you can see from those I've got on the screen here, these are big, professional, important players in the whole of this sector, very much focused on creating solutions and delivering capability and impact for the benefit of everyone. These are companies that, if you like, get it, and individuals from them have been identified based upon their vision to transform the industry and commitment to the cause. That coalition has formed a number of product groups, risk management being the one that we are talking about. These four are the first ones that have been created, and then in time they will expand the product groups as the momentum builds. Within each of the product groups, they're looking at iterating a number of jigsaw lids, and I'll show you a jigsaw lid in the next slide. And this is aligned to each of those functional disciplines I've just shown you. And they segment their ideas within three horizons that I've got shown on the screen here. Either refine, which is just improve things. That's fine. Enhance things when you're looking at actually bringing new methods in and a step change in how we work. And then finally, reimagining things completely. Now, these horizons, importantly, they're not linear and they're not sequential. But these three words are really important as far as the different options we have available. And so you have a jigsaw lid, this one being the jigsaw lid for risk management, within which there are a number of jigsaw pieces that have been developed by the coalition. And the idea, you can see my refine, enhance, and reimagine up at the top, is that you can pick different jigsaw pieces according to the end use case for an organization or the professional where we're all going together. And like I say, they're not sequential. You don't have to start on the left and move to the right. You can, in some cases, go straight to some reimagining. So when they create the jigsaw lids, they're taking ideas from the books that Martin has written, and Andy's going to talk about those, develop a series of potential solutions, and then break each of them down into a specification for that particular solution. And then they will come up with an overview of the implications for the specific stakeholders or personas accordingly. So within this, if any of you are available, hopefully some of you already booked onto our hack in October, the 22nd, 23rd of October. I'll ask Erin just to put a link to it on the chat now. It's being sponsored in Derby by Rolls-Royce, and there is going to be one of the challenges up at that hack specifically based around risk. And that particular one is sponsored this time by EDF Nuclear. So if you're interested in taking some of the things we're talking about today forward, please do register and come up to that Hacking Derby in October. So that's enough just as a little beginning from me. And Andy, can I hand over to you now?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Afternoon for those of you who are in the same time zone as me. And I guess good morning or good evening if you're somewhere else. So I'm going to talk about the book that was written to support those jigsaw lid pieces and the product group that's developing some new capability on behalf of the client coalition. But I thought I'd start by just referencing sort of my role. So I was asked to edit the book, and Martin presented me with a sort of an outline and then some sort of early drafts, of I think 200 and something pages. I think my first transcript I received. So it wasn't a trivial task to pick up and help Martin and edit the book. But the reason I did it, if you can just move to the next slide, please, it is really related to the work of the Project Data Analytics Task Force that Christoph mentioned. And the task force was set up in 2020 during lockdown, when I think quite a few of us were feeling sorry for ourselves and also had a bit of time on our hands to think about other things. And we were pondering the question that, where we know that there are some stubborn and persistent performance issues, whether that's things like overruns or whether that's productivity or whether that's predictability, but whatever those are, that there must be a better, more data-driven approach to treating them. And particularly with the advances of computing and the power of computing and the advances in practice around data analytics. So we're able to get more insight and understanding of management processes in particular, compared to now, and certainly when we're thinking about it in 2020 compared to 20, 30 years ago, or 40 or 50 years ago, when many of the bodies of knowledge that we follow and use today were first put together. And so you can see one of the things that the Project Data Analytics Task Force put together was a manifesto for data-driven project delivery, and it includes 6 pledges that we ask individuals, organizations and institutions to sign up to. And one of those was that we use data analytics not just to make the current practice go faster, so to speak, but to sort of bust perhaps some of the project management myths and beliefs that might be in place. And the word belief, I think, there is really quite critical, because sometimes when I certainly hear debates around waterfall versus other methods and so on, it can feel a little bit evangelical and sort of it's one belief system over another. But what we wanted to do was to use data analytics to reimagine how we work and discover new, different ways of doing things that just wasn't available to us in the past. And some of that goes back to some work that was done by Professor Rodney Turner, I think nearly 20 years ago now, where through extensive analysis of completed projects, and particularly ones that overran, discovering that using the iron triangle that was introduced to help us shape projects was problematic when we use it to control projects, and it creates a positive feedback loop, and it actually causes projects to spiral out of control. Yet at the time, if we go to project management school, we talked about the iron triangle not just for scoping but also for control, and he dispelled the myth that we shouldn't be using it for control. If you can just move to the next slide, please. So that's why I offered to get involved. It really aligns with that first pledge on the manifesto that I had a hand in putting together. So in terms of the book itself, it's in a number of parts. So the first bit is just there's some common parts across the series of books that Martin is putting together, but around the role of AI and data analytics in projects. but outside the common parts of the book. The first bit is around just sort of a run through of what the current theory of risk management is, and there's lots of reference there to the various sources of guidance that exist, whether that's from the APM or the various risk management institutions and so on. And then looking at the current practice, and in particular considering the performance of those management processes against what we would expect from them. So the difference between theory and practice, if you like. Then understanding those differences and identifying in particular where elements might be problematic. What we really want to look at is, where's the issues that we could use AI and data analytics to address. Moving on from that, the opportunities, sort of applying the sweet spot of AI and data analytics to tackle those issues. And particularly here, we're thinking of sort of pattern recognition aspects of AI and data analytics to these sort of issues that we're seeing in that sort of theory versus practice. And then the book offers up two ladders, if you like, or two possible ways to go. And this sort of relates to the refine, enhance and reimagine horizons that Christoph shared right at the beginning, because one ladder, the refine, there's only so far we can go. There's a limit to how quick and how efficient and how effective we can make that management system improved by. There's another ladder, the reimagine ladder, which is we actually move on from how we've currently done things today and apply a different way, and that has potential to go further. And that's the hypothesis that's laid out in the book. But that's in the book. I think so, something like 160 or so pages in total. So my editing work, I think, got about 100 pages down in terms of boiling it down. So a bit like a delicious gravy. I think every iteration is sort of a bit reduced but more tasty. And so hopefully you agree to that. You agree with that when you read it. If you can move to the next slide, please. So in terms of the current practice part and the guidance, there's extensive referencing here. So if there are any sort of students on this call, or anyone that's going through PMQ or any other sort of qualification, it's a fantastic source of referencing to everything that's out there in terms of good practice or current practice of risk management. And it describes the current practice in terms of the processes that we follow, and sort of at top level we've got the sort of identify, analyze, manage cycle that IAM, as some people refer it as, and that there's lots of versions of that. There's that's a sort of a 3-element version. Identify, analyze, manage. There's 5 steps. There's 7 steps. There's more detailed steps. But fundamentally, it's about understanding the context of the risk you want to manage, the project and its objectives and so on. So what's at risk, identifying what could cause the project to not deliver on those objectives, analyze the individual risks that you've identified, think about how you're going to treat them, implement those treatments, monitor their effectiveness, and then sort of review how you move on in terms of the next stage of the project and so on. So regardless of which source of guidance you use, they mostly follow that sort of same approach to the process, and they mostly include a number of methods, and they're loosely split into 2. There's the qualitative methods, so things like probability impact matrices, using SWOT analysis, using Delphi, root cause analysis, risk categorization, running workshops, and so on. So they're that sort of qualitative aspect of doing risk analysis and management. And then there's the quantitative aspects that are referenced in the book. So QRA often is used as a label for that, but Monte Carlo analysis, decision tree analysis, sensitivity analysis, PERT or program evaluation and review technique. The understanding the probability distributions of different types of risk as well, Bayesian analysis, simulation, scenario analysis, and so on. And I could go on and on. It's an extensive list, sort of reviewing those current practices across both qualitative and quantitative. So if we could just move to the next slide, please, Erin. So the challenge we've got when you sort of you sort of boil it down, and when we sort of reference that there's lots of material out there reviewing performance of risk management, but fundamentally it comes down to the humans guessing what might go wrong on a project, and there are lots of issues with that. So as by way of example, and I know I've shared this on some webinars previously, but I reviewed a project where I came across a risk, and I was just testing how the project was set up to succeed. And this risk caught my attention because it was sort of driving some of the numbers in its QRA. But in there was a risk that a supplier could be late if for a particular bit of machinery that was critical to the project. So that was the risk. It's described in that way. Supplier might be late in delivering this critical piece of machinery. And it was in the risk register as 30% likelihood and a high impact as a critical bit of machinery. So when I probed around it and said to the project manager, well, let's think about the 30% first. If you had 10 projects like this, how likely would it be that this machinery would be late? And the project manager thought about it for a while and said, probably about 1 out of those 10 projects, so a 1 in 10. But it was on the risk register as 30% likely. So I phrased my question a bit differently. So if you had 10 suppliers like this, how likely would it be that this supplier would be late? And he thought about it again. He said, actually, I think it's probably about a 1 in 20 chance of the supplier being late, because they're pretty good. This is what they do for a living. This is their business. So okay, so that's either now 10% or it's 5%, but your risk register says 30%. So we've now got a difference between what was in the risk register, what was causing decisions about how to mitigate it, and so on. And just by me just probing around using a number in a population, 1 in 10. If there's 10 projects like this or 20 projects like this, could you give me a number? It's a different way of exploring it. And then we had a look at being late, and I wanted to know what being late really meant. And so I gave the option to the project manager to say, if it was a day late, a week late, or a year late, which one of those are we talking about? And I was told, stop being silly. It's not a year late. We're not talking about that. But it's more likely to be a day or a week late in terms of the sort of an outcome that the project manager could envisage. So I asked the question in terms of, well, what would actually be late in terms of it causing you a critical issue? Because you said it's critical to the project. And he said, well, that's probably going to be a month late. So now we've got this view. It's 1 in 10 or 1 in 20. It's 1 week would be more reasonable to suggest it could be late, but it's the month late that was causing the high evaluation when it was the high impact. So we had a real mismatch on the probability impact matrix. If it was used that way, it would be sort of in medium likelihood, high impact. And in reality, it was low likelihood and low impact. And that was just 5 minutes of me probing one thing with an experienced, competent project professional on an item on their risk register that project executives and others would be reviewing. So I have a real challenge around the sort of the human process of guessing, because we're not very good at guessing when things are in a probabilistic way. And a part of that is how we express risks, or how we express uncertainty, particularly as a percentage. Because as a species, we've only been using percentages for less than 100 years since the introduction of modern computing. Before that, we've always used fractions, a number in a population, 1 in 4, typically one person in a family unit, 1 in 10, typically one person on a sports team, 1 in 30, typically one person in a classroom. We understand those as ratios. We don't really understand 5%, 10%, 20%. We're pretty poor at understanding percentages as a species. So that's one challenge that we've got. And on behalf of the community, if you like, the book goes into lots of studies, whether that's from the likes of the National Audit Office, whether that's IPA's reports, whether that's APM's reports and other institutions, and lots of academic journals and lots of books like this one, the Noise, which talks about the challenge of bias and noise in data. This one, How to Expect the Unexpected. There's some great stuff in there about our challenge of the use of statistics, and this one, sort of King and K's, How to Expect the Unexpected. And there's loads and loads of others. I don't know how many sources there are, probably more than 100 sources where we've looked at that challenge of current practice. Next slide, please. So just to get us thinking about this, and Christoph mentioned before, if we can have a bit of a conversation on some of these things. So I've got a question for you. So you had a plan, the plan changed and it caused the project completion to be delayed. So perhaps a milestone was going to be 1st of October, and now we're looking at 1st of November. Was that because of a risk? Just pop your thoughts in the chat window for that. We had a change and it caused the project to be delayed. Was it a risk? Is everyone able to pop things into the chat, Christoph? Okay, we've got some coming in, thanks. Yeah. So Barnaby, you're quite correct. I haven't given you the full picture, a bit like the risk of the supplier being late. It was insufficient on that one. But the answer is maybe. I mean, if it was the plan changed because something that was uncertain occurred, then that's the definition that we looked at right at the beginning, that it was uncertainty that caused the plan to change, and therefore you could argue that was because of a risk. Or if it was a change because there's a change of heart, change of requirements, or there was a test that wasn't completed and that wasn't uncertain, then it's not necessarily because of risk, and we'll come on to the challenges with that later. So I've got another question for you, similar, and I suspect I might get another similar answer to what Barnaby just offered there. If you can move to the next slide. So that question I just asked you was about the cause of risk. What was the cause of that delay, and therefore the cause of the uncertainty, and therefore the information that we could have to help us answer that. But this one's about mitigation. So if let's say it's a major project, a few £100 million perhaps, and you've got £1 million spent on risk mitigation, where and how would you spend it? And when choosing what to do, how you know how effective your £1 million to prevent things going wrong is. So any ideas on that? How would you know how effective your mitigations are?
Again, if anyone wants to just put their hand up and unmute and just take part in more of an interactive discussion with Andy, please do that, or type into the chat.
I think Barnaby's offered to come in, so we can unmute Barnaby.
I don't think there isn't one specific answer how you spend it, is it? I mean, you'd assess it. You could look at the biggest risks and apportion some mitigation or to those specific risks. You could get some outside consultancy and perhaps review your project with specialists and lessons learned. And I think that would be a case by case, wouldn't it? You'd probably sit down, you'd probably convene a forum, you'd consult. You'd probably put a bit on the side. There's a good idea for when those risks actually manifest. But I think you've got a good point, don't you? How do you assess the relative merits of deciding to spend that money one way over another? And I can tell you how most of that would actually happen in practice. I think it would actually happen with the sponsor's gut feeling. If that's probably how that's actually going to happen, but if there's a better way, I'm all ears.
So Barnaby, we're then going back to that human process of guessing, not just in terms of things like likelihood and impact, but now we've got that human process. We could call it intuition, if you like, in terms of where we should spend our budget to prevent or to minimise the impact of those risks. I think Subhash wants to come in. Unmute, Subhash.
This is Christoph. Hi, Andy. Can you hear me?
I can.
We can, Subhash.
Yep. So just on that point, my view is that from my own experiences, we start off at whatever stage with the risk register, but we quite often will have a mitigated target that we're working to, and that will be phased depending on which phase of the project the risks may be more appropriate to. My own experience is that we do very little to manage the mitigation, and many of the overruns are because we don't mitigate. And when we forecast the post-mitigation values, they're obviously lower than the original. So if we're managing the process in a reasonable way, the priorities of where you spend your money to mitigate will be self-evident. And will prioritize themselves. So I think if we follow that methodology, we are controlling how we prioritize spending the risk order.
Yeah, and so there, that one is around thinking where the mitigation could be most effective or the greatest risk reduction, whether that's in probability or impact. So I'll come back to that in a moment. I think we've got another offer to come in.
Yeah, I think just to add on that as well, sorry, David Glass speaking here.
Hi, David.
Just the mitigation there, being physical and something tangible versus, as I said, so if something's physical and tangible, you could predict the results. Again, I was in my head thinking about, maybe IT equipment going offshore. Right, you need to overstock your IT equipment for delays or things not arriving or things being damaged, all these kind of potential risks. So I think the mitigation as well, if you could physically and tangibly put something on it versus, yeah, okay, we're going to get a bit of consultancy, that's not going to actually fix your problem. It might, but yeah, I guess there's a difference in, being able to monitor something that's physical versus then something that is, in theory, this should reduce the risk.
Yeah, so now we're getting sort of qualitative aspects around the effects of mitigation and come back to, I think, the first one at Barnaby, which was probably more about contingency rather than prevention. So being able to respond when it does happen rather than perhaps potentially reducing it. It's interesting in the comments. So thanks for that. In the comments, we've got Marcel sort of talked about the critical path, but just thinking that that's obviously from a schedule perspective. And I know my previous question talked about delays, so we've probably sort of influenced the room in terms of us thinking of risk more about delay than perhaps other performance criteria. But the criticality, I think, is a really.
Would Leanne want to be prepared to unmute and talk?
Yep.
As well, Leanne, I don't know if you're able to talk. Sorry, go on, Andy.
Yeah, just on that criticality bit, that's then thinking about how important that element is to the overall success of the project. So I'll give you an example in terms of mitigation. So I'll come on to a little bit of this in a moment, but the vaccine task force, when we were looking to have a vaccine for the nation, they didn't just choose the best option, they ended up choosing every option. So there was a high appetite to tolerate investing in a possible vaccine that may never get used, because they didn't know at the time, when there were like 8 runners, if there were horses, which of those horses would come in. And it wasn't a case of which horse would come in first, it was more a case of which horses would come in at all. So instead of saying we're going to go with these 2 or 3 horses, we ended up backing all the horses, took a portfolio approach. And interestingly, biotech does that a lot. So it's not necessarily about the success of an individual project, it's about the success of the performance of the portfolio as a whole. And that changes your attitude to risk management completely when you put it up perhaps to that portfolio level. Okay, so I'm going to move on from from this bit now, but just move on to the next slide if you
Andy,
could.
Did you want to unmute Leanne?
Yes, sir, please, if Leanne wants to come in on that.
Erin, could you unmute Leanne for me, please?
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes, we
can.
can hear
Yes.
you.
Hi, Leanne.
Hi, yeah. So I'll caveat this with I'm not a risk professional. I'm a technology product manager, looking at how we can kind of help major programs manage their PMOs using kind of data and analytics. So just trying to think about, you know, is there a way of using experience on past projects and kind of the data that's collected on some of these major programs across the country and potentially wider to influence the decisions that are made in these sort of spaces, and kind of surfacing that for risk managers and program leadership to kind of make decisions based on.
Yes, Leanne, perfect timing, because that's my very next point of direction we're going to go in, which is
I'll remute and listen.
Yeah, I will pay you later, Leanne. You know. So the answer to that is a resounding yes. You know, we think about our projects as all being unique. In fact, it's one of the characteristics of projects. I think it's in the in sort of the Prince 2 manual that, you know, our project has elements of uniqueness, but a lot of things in your project are not unique. We're doing them time and time again. We do have lots of data relating to projects. If we were able to pull them or use them in a way that is more organized, we can do exactly as you just said. We can start to have a lot more insight coming back to that supplier who might be late, rather than me probing and querying the project manager about, you know, how likely it is. We would be sitting down to do our initial risk workshop, and our data, whether it's our data or from a wider community or from a whole industry sector, would be saying, here's the likelihood of this supplier being these number of days late. We can then make decisions because we've now got data. We're now making a data-driven decision rather than it being a bit of a guess. Now, we'd also want to understand, does that context apply equally to our context and so on? So it's not just a case of treating it blindly. You'd want to test it, but we can do that. And that's one of the critical arguments in Martin's book, that there is a need for us thinking about project data and how we access project data and how we use it to train our models and so on, in order to unlock some of the opportunities in horizons, well, all the way through actually, horizon 1, 2, and 3. And we can move to the next, please. So one of the things that the book argues, or Martin argues in the book, is that we need to move from that guessing at one end of the spectrum, and we are sort of, a lot of us are on this journey, on this sort of path towards the bottom. Actually, we probably should move this one the other way up, so it's more aspirational. But the journey is heading to something where we're not just doing sort of predictive analytics, but actually it's about variance analytics. And if you can move to the next slide, and what we mean by that, you can see it on the jigsaw lid that was shared earlier. Across these three horizons, our North Star for risk management isn't better risk management, but actually better variance analysis. So we understand what the causes of variance are. We can understand how we can have more predictability in our projects. With more predictability comes more confidence. With more predictability comes more efficiency in terms of capital deployed or resources deployed as well. So there's huge numbers of benefits from that variance analytics. And the reason why this sort of label of variance analytics has come up, through that review of all of the challenges we have over our current practice, a theme emerged from the review of current practice, which is ultimately we can reduce the risk on our projects if we just manage them better. And if we're set up better, then we can then look at what's going to be the cause of variance, not through poor management, but through genuine uncertainty that's affecting the project. So that's the argument in the book, and it offers lots of examples to support some of these these sort of circles on the jigsaw lid. So, for example, Horizon 1, it could be things like robotics, so automation, so that the risk of the baton not being passed from one part of your project to another reduces because that baton passing is now automated. Or it could be that we get alerts so that we can act on things before we need to, rather than after an event through, again, that sort of automation, that detection, more sensors and so on. So that's that Horizon 1. Or it could be we're using large language models to help guide as an advisor to the project professionals based upon past projects to say, if I've got a project with these characteristics, what sort of things typically could go wrong? And that could be an input to your risk workshop. You're then likely to have better conversations, and then you're likely to have a more robust approach to your project. Or it could be better visuals. We do know that a lot of the capabilities we've got with generative AI is actually, it's a really good way of producing better insights through visuals. Horizon 2 could be a recommender. So instead of just saying, here's the sort of like predisposition of things, this is how we, these are the things that you could do. And actually in the past, option 1 has this likelihood of success, option 2 has this likelihood of success, and option 3 comes with these secondary risks. Which would you like to do? Chris, if you could just pause, because I'm actually receptionist today and there's just been a ring of the doorbell. I think my dogs are coming back from their walk. I'll be 20 seconds if you can sing.
Andy will be back with us very shortly, but is there anyone on this call who has seen or been a part of with us these jigsaw lids? I know, Sebash, you've got your Barnaby's got his hand up. Barnaby, do you want to talk? Erin, could you just unmute Barnaby?
I was going to cover up Andy's dog collection with what I thought might be an interesting observation, but so quick was Andy's dog collection that the opportunity passed.
Oh, go on, Barnaby. Don't let it stop you.
Well, this has been interesting. It really is quite insightful, and there's a lot to unpack here. Okay, I applaud the not getting lost down definitions, nomenclature, and semantics. So there's always a risk of doing that, right? So we've not done it so far, and we probably should try and avoid it for the rest of the gig for everyone's mutual benefit. There is something that occurs to me here, which is just worth a note, and I wonder if anyone else thinking the same thing. If I sort of distill all of this into a brutal and probably very unfair summary, you could take an investment that's under consideration that says it's going to cost this much and it's going to deliver this many benefits, okay? And we might get to a point where we could reliably assign a balancing algorithm to that and actually say, no, it's not going to cost that, it's actually going to cost this. And those benefits are usually overstated by 45%, or in the case of the last government, 85% or more. And you could adjust those figures, okay, and then play them back to the sponsor so that they are that future performance has a reflection in it of historical data, okay. And I've probably not done this justice, but I hope there's some parallel there in what you're trying to do with the data. Now it just occurs to me that actually senior decision makers, stakeholders, sponsors, budget holders, and particularly political vicissitudes, for want of a better term, are not going to thank you for that, are they? You are actually going to be going to people with a data-driven input, and they don't want data, they want rah 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 and on the steps and a big fanfare. The last thing they want is friction and headwinds to their grand plans. And I just wondered if anyone else had a view on that while as laudable as this is, and I do support it utterly, do you see any pushback in the decision making landscape from those sponsors and those budget holders?
It's part of it I do, and this sort of aligns with some some initiatives that's sort of in play with the Association for Project Management around strategic misrepresentation, which is some of the things you were just describing there. And particularly when, coming back to a portfolio level, you're comparing investment A, investment B, investment C, you really want to be sure or be confident that they've been prepared equally in terms of the level of diligence and the way they're stating their benefits and costs and so on. So on the right hand side of the sort of variance analytics, and this is why there's a bit about it just being good project management, is can we learn from other sectors and other domains in terms of how they're reducing risk? And one of the thinking on the right hand side would be things like, could we have an equivalent of a black box on our projects, in the way that new drivers, learner drivers, can have a black box fitted to their car, so that their insurance premium can come down. Now, the presence of the black box does change the performance of the driving, because they know that everything's going to be on record, but it also starts to inform other things, so that where there are accidents, you're now getting, like in the aviation industry, some rich data about the causes of accidents. Was it road speed? Was it other things, and so on? And you can add it to some other sensors that might be available to the car as well. So I think it will change. I think once we start being more transparent, because we've got more sensors and we just got the ability to record and keep and make sense of data, that I think the accountability will go up, and some of those challenges you were just describing will reduce. So I think there will be an impact on decision makers when we move to the right on these charts.
Thank you.
So and thanks for that. We did anticipate that risk, by the way, of the dog walk coming back, but I was hoping that Christoph could sing. I didn't get to experience it. Right. Next slide, please. So
Andy, Sebastian's hand is up. I don't know
okay.
if you want to get him
please come
in at this stage.
We've got plenty of time. So
okay. Erin, could you unmute Sebastian, please?
Yes, just a very quick observation, Andy. I think the risk management piece for me, in one way, at the very highest level, is about quantum at one level. The mechanics of how we get to quantum is everything we're discussing in terms of process, procedures, etc., etc. And it's true to say that in the life cycle, project life cycle, we start on the left-hand side with a lot of uncertainty, and as we progress through the project, we want to drive it down as much as possible, optimize, etc. I think one of the things for me over the years of my experience has been risk transfer and having the appropriate party. And everybody talks about the right person should manage the risk, but if we distill it down to client, delivery authority, contractor at the very highest level, there is some work to do there. The other is competence of all parties that contribute to the risk management in its own right. And this is, in my view, all part of the governance, delegated authority, competence, capability, etc. And the worst case for me is asking a less than qualified client to make a really detailed decision, which in many cases, as we all know, is probably a little unfair. So I think there are a lot of things about the high level management of the risk, as opposed to not including the quantity.
Yeah, and that's really right, and that sort of conclusion does come out when I was editing the book. As I say, when Martin makes that leap from risk management to variance analytics, there is a core bit in there about actually it's just about doing it right in the first place. So a lot of things that we get reported as a risk, project had these risks, it's because it was weak project management or poor project management practice. So the things you're describing around sort of capable client would sort of be in that weak project management bit. So the solution to that is to have more capable clients, or matching the decision making to the ability to make those decisions. And likewise with that risk transfer, it's just about making sure that the risk is not transferred, but allocated or assigned to those best able to own them. And we can use, so on the right hand side, I won't go back, but on there around testing the robustness of our setup. So we can use certainly some of the large language models to to compare and contrast, so that we can get some insight as to how we're set up to succeed on this project. So a little bit of a caveat, though. So there's a number of comparisons in the book, particularly about so other domains, and one of the other domains would be weather, for example, and around sort of understanding the differences between sort of ordered systems and complex adaptive systems. And if we start to apply things that work on an ordered system to a complex adaptive system, it just doesn't work. So we do need to recognize that some of the things that we work with will be in an environment that we would describe as mathematically chaos. Not necessarily to say it's chaotic in terms of competence chaotic, but it's just very turbulent, and that's really difficult to model. So what we need are other ways to do it. And if you think about weather, weather is still very difficult to model in the long term, but what we've actually got now is a lot more insight, massive more insight in the short term. So if you were to compare a weather forecast that you've seen today with one from just 10 years ago or 30 years ago, the granularity you're now getting in terms of when to expect rain, what sort of rain, which parts of your county or your area it's going to affect, is so different to what we've had before. And we will be getting that sort of insight on our projects for these chaotic complex adaptive systems, rather than trying to make it 100% accurate. It's more about trends, where we're trending to, and what decisions we can take now. So just a bit of a caveat: when we get into this world, we do need to understand that we won't be able to solve it all, and we need to be wise not to apply things to the wrong type of environment. So there's quite a caveat added in the book. I think it's a sort of signposting. There could be a future book on those topics. Next slide, please. So my sort of way of sort of summing some of this up, I flashed up two of these books, which are sort of business books, but I'm adding a third book to this one. It's one of my favourite authors from the sort of fantasy genre, Terry Pratchett, who used to work in major projects, by the way. He was in the nuclear industry. I think he was head of comms at some point in his biography. But you can see here, we've got the first one around sort of, we're seeking certainties to help us with our decisions, but those certainties just cannot exist. So coming back to our risk register, that project manager who'd put 30%, and I argued and I persuaded him through discussion that it should be 5%. Now, both of us are wrong. We're absolutely wrong, because at the end of that project, that supplier was either on time or late. So the result of that project was 0 or 100. So even after my discussion with the project manager, we were both wrong, because it came out as 0 or 100, and we were trying to find a certainty that could never exist. So that's Mervyn King's offer to this domain. And then we've got Kit Yates, who says there's a science to making it and then an art when knowing not to. And then Terry Pratchett basically says that we've got these things that are 1,000,000 to 1 chance of happening, but 9 times out of 10 they do. And it's the magicians that were saying that. Now, we could argue that our modern project professional needs to be a bit scientist, a bit artist, a bit magician. But I think what you can see from the jigsaw lid is that we probably don't want to be magicians, but we probably do want to be more wizards. And those wizards do exist. They're data scientists, AI technicians. The apps that you're going to be using, can help us with our risk management approaches. So next slide, please. So it will change how we work, just as when I started to work, we didn't have desktop PCs. We wrote things down on paper. I know some of you believe I can't be that old, but I am. And when we developed documents, we had to hand our handwritten content to a typing pool. They would write something up. We would then check it send it back, and after 2 or 3 iterations, the document we wanted would come back. In fact, on my graduate training, my first week, my first week of graduate training, one of the first things we learned was how to mark up documents to send them back to the typing pool. Typing pools don't exist today because we all got desktop PCs, we all had word processing, and we all learned how to use them. So there will be the same. There'll be some things that we rely on our risk management function to help us with that now our project managers will just do themselves. So there will be a change. That's something we need to work through and debate. And there's some offers of ideas about centralization, distribution, and so on in the book. So let's move to the next slide, please. So the book finishes before the long appendices with a view that there are these 2 ladders. The one ladder is in the refine column, which can only go so far. But if we go to the enhance and reimagine side of the jigsaw lid, then that ladder can take us further. And it's advocating that we should start looking to that ladder rather than trying to perfect something we do today that is, by all the evidence of all the analysis that's referenced, is limiting. So that's where it concludes. And if you can just move to the next slide. Now, some of you may think that everything I've said and everything that is offered in the book is a load of rubbish, and that's fine if you feel like that. But I would argue or ask you to read the book and offer up some other evidence and make your own mind up. So don't just believe what I've said today. Have a read of it. As I say, it's a great reference guide to everything that's out there on risk management at the moment. All the reports that are describing the issues with it, and then it does offer potential remedies to the approach. I see that Erin just put a link in the chat so you can see where you can get copies of the book, so please do download it. It's a version 1. As the elements of that jigsaw lid get developed by the coalition and we start to uncover the potential of using data analytics and AI across those processes, there will be an update to it in the future. So it'd be great if others contributed to it too. So I'm going to hand over here to Christoph, who's going to talk about sort of skilling, and that's just really what should we be doing. So thinking about this shift from risk management, trying to fool ourselves that we can manage uncertainty, to thinking more about variance analytics. What should we do as project professionals? So Christoph, over to you.
Thank you, Andy, very much indeed. So the next phase of that, which is critical to all of us, is that where organizations get it and get committed and realize, as Andy is saying, that this world of project delivery is going to change whether we like it or not, the best thing to do is to be on it. And what I say is that then really there's 2 stages right at the beginning. The first is that with the organizations is a process of education on trying to make senior leaders, board members, some of which are used to those old days of paper and whatever, to get it. And once they do, the next phase, in my view, is to start building up your change agents, to get your workforce upskilled. Once they are now bought into where the organization and the profession is going, they will help be able to deliver the jigsaw pieces within those lids, which can apply just to their own job, to their own organization, to the world of project delivery. And so getting upskilled and putting people onto the apprentices is important. We are running a risk management level 4 apprenticeship, projecting success. We're an accredited training provider to do that. And it's a 15-month course with 3 months of endpoint assessment at the end, tutor-led, all online. And during it, the learners will get an opportunity to take part in our hackathons. I mentioned the next hackathon, which is in the chat, which is being sponsored by Rolls-Royce in Derby on the 22nd, 23rd of October this year. The following one will be, we hope, in, I don't know the location, it'll either be Gloucester or London. And that will be in March next year. But the learners can take part in the hackathons. And I've mentioned that EDF have put a real end use case with the data, and one of our hack challenges in October, which is all to do with risk. So that's what the apprentice consists of. For the apprentice, they're going to build the skills. They're going to automate things that are routine, paper, manually driven, and addressing all of the points that Andy was making on getting better informed decisions proactively. And then being in that cohort of people who are at the forefront of this change in project delivery. For the employer, they get the opportunity to move on those three horizons towards reimagining how risk management can be delivered, preempting issues before they arrive, and increasing efficiency. And whilst it is 20% of someone's time to go on an apprenticeship, I would argue that if they haven't saved themselves, their organization, way more than that 20%, we and they have definitely got it wrong. And certainly all of the evidence that we've got suggests that they will gain far more than that. So 26 off-the-job training days with self-study is what's required, and 20 days of online teaching over the 15 months. Erin will put into chat, if she hasn't already, she might have done, a link to our website where you can express an interest. Otherwise, at the top of the chat is a link to my business card. Please do just get in touch with us. So broadly, we've got an opportunity here right now to completely reimagine risk management. And what we're hoping to do with people, with our webinars, the people who contributed, thank you very much indeed to that, is to move that dial forward. So we've got, we have come up to the end of our time, but I'm happy to stay on for any questions. Sebash, you've got one. So Erin, could you just unmute Sebash, please?
Yes, so thank you, Christoph. Thank you, Andy. It's just a conclusion from me because I have to jump on a train. But I think from my perspective and my own personal experiences is quantum, and the management of quantum is something we need to obviously focus on because everything we do at the frequencies we do include the outputs into our forecast, and that's when it starts to get more difficult to substantiate and to defend. But my three pillars are, as always, people, process procedures, and then obviously technology. And I think AI will give us improved predictability. As Leanne mentioned, competence and having the right people at the right time reviewing risks will also add to that improved predictability. And routine variation analysis, monthly, weekly, whatever we want to do, will show where the dial is shifting and then to act upon it. So competent people at the heart of all of that. But I agree.
Sebash, thank you very much indeed. Andy, thank you very much for presenting. And can I thank everyone on the call very much for taking part in it. And I do hope it's been useful to all of you, and look forward to linking and engaging with you more as we go forward. Thank you all very much indeed, and have a good day.